I pressed play and watched my own daughter pick the lock on my desk, her boyfriend whispering about deeds and easy money. The first page she photographed was my home, 30 years of sweat flattened into a screenshot. "Dad, just sign it. It's for your own good," she told me yesterday, eyes steady like the lie had already rehearsed its alibi. In that moment, love didn't break. It recalculated. I wasn't losing a house. I was learning who would steal it while I was still breathing and how I'd stop them. Before we dive into today's story, let us know where you're watching from. And as you watch, don't just sit back. Be part of the experience. If a moment grabs your attention, whether it's powerful, unexpected, or deeply moving, drop a comment with the timestamp and share your thoughts. Your reactions bring the story to life, and we love seeing which moments resonate with you the most. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a coffee or tea, settle in, and let's begin. The rain had been behaving like a metronome all week, ticking against the cedar shingles until the whole house felt tuned to a steady beat. I came in from the steps with my jacket speckled dark and hung it on the brass hook by the door. The air smelled of river and woodshop. I brewed mint tea and walked the quiet rooms the way you walk a bridge you used to inspect, hand along the rail, eyes on the joins. In the workroom, I checked the drafting table. Pencils laid to a ruler's edge, calipers in their felt bed, a stack of skiff planks awaiting the next coat of varnish. Against the back wall, the metal file drawer watched like a sentry. I thumbed the key, listened for the click, and eased it open. Deed in a manila sleeve, draft will behind a red tab, insurance papers in blue jackets, each dated with a neat block letter. It sounds fussy until you lose something once. I prefer knowing where things live. The technician had come 3 days earlier, a kid with tidy hair and a tattoo peeking from his cuff. He swapped the fried board in the smart doorbell, reset the backyard camera, and paired both with my phone. "You're all set," he'd said, cheerful as a weatherman. The thumbnails were knife-sharp, porch in perfect perspective, flagstones slick, the maples bare branches cross-hatching the gray. I meant to text Lauren that the system was back online. I even typed, "Hey kiddo, camera's back up," and let it sit. Lauren is good about stopping by on her way home from gigs. She calls it checking in on me. Grief settled in the house when Julia died. Some evenings, Lauren brings Evan. He talks markets and opportunity and how Portland is overdue for new money. I nod because it costs nothing to nod. I still consult for the boys on their science team, emailing notes about stress curves and why steel remembers what you did to it. The notes go out around 10 after dishes and the sweep of the porch. Tonight I drafted a paragraph about live loads and the way a structure carries surprise when you've designed the joints to move. It's what I want now, movement where life pushes. A little give that doesn't collapse. The kitchen at dusk is my favorite room. Lamplight erases the weather and makes the maple table look warmer than it is. Julia's white wine sits in the refrigerator door, a relic I keep without a reason I can defend. I took down 2 mugs, left one by the sink out of muscle memory, and returned it to the shelf. Habit, for better or worse, is a kind of company. By 7, the rain had thickened to a hush and the house closed around it. The phone lay charging on the counter. A green dot on the screen told me both cameras were healthy, the way a pilot light reassures your throat in January. I remembered the unsent text to Lauren and felt a prickle of guilt. I wrote a sticky note, "Tell L cams," and pinned it under the technician's receipt. On the wall, the spare keys hung in a row: boat, shed, mailbox, house. Through the window, the river slouched past, wide and dull. I stood there long enough for the tea to cool and drank it anyway. A faint tremor in the phone's haptic motor kissed the countertop. "Motion detected," the banner said. "It happens a dozen times. Cats, raccoons, wind teasing the porch fern." I pressed my thumb to wake the screen, not alarmed, more curious than anything. A thumbnail expanded into the front step, glossy and empty. I don't live expecting trouble. I was paid for decades to expect failure in steel and concrete. In people, I try to expect the better thing. If something bothers me, I shelve it until I have the facts. That's how you prevent false bridges in your head. I rinsed the mug, dried it, set it on the second shelf. The house looked back at me with the satisfied face of a list with every box checked. I picked up the phone again, opened the app, and admired the geometry of the interface, two panes like twins under glass. The rain hissed a little louder, or I merely heard it more closely. Another alert popped. Backyard camera recording. The green dot pulsed once and steadied. I felt not fear, but the mild curiosity that makes you lean forward in a good chair. The face of the phone caught a faint reflection of my lamp, a ghost over the black pane. I balanced the device so my thumb hovered above the triangle. That means now. I thought of Lauren then, how she used to swing her legs from that chair as a child and draw houses with windows too big for their walls. I thought of Julia's hands, flour-dusted. There is a mercy in routine until there isn't. I tapped play. The image resolved into a single crystalline frame, and something ran cold from the base of my skull to my palms. If you're still watching and feeling the weight of Daniel's quiet life before everything unraveled, comment number 1 below so I know you're with me. Now, let's move on to Chapter 2, where the first cracks begin to show. The porch came up like a stage, rain dimpling the rail, stone steps gleaming. The keypad lit blue squares quick as breath, and a code I knew by muscle moved the deadbolt. Lauren crossed the threshold with her hood half up and her eyes already past the foyer. Evan followed, lean and restless, the kind of presence that always seems to be late for a better room. They didn't call out. They didn't listen for me. They behaved like the house had learned a new owner. She thumbed a message and hung her jacket on the wrong hook, a small trespass that announced a larger one. He scanned the hall the way agents read a floor plan, angles, routes, sightlines. The camera switched to my workroom. I saw my face faintly in the phone's glass, a pale oval hovering above the feed, as if some part of me stood at the door and failed to intervene. Lauren stepped to the metal file drawer, touched the lock with 2 fingers, and reached for the key jar on the shelf. She didn't read labels. She weighed and chose. The correct key found her palm like it remembered her. The drawer slid open with a soft throat clearing I felt behind the ribs. Evan pulled on thin gloves with practiced care, and the gesture scraped a nerve I didn't know still lived. The audio fractured and then delivered a sentence as clinical as a blood test. Vince can notarize remote. His voice didn't rise or fall, it measured. He lifted the yellow folder from the rear, the one that sits behind insurance in the slot I never touch without intent, and laid it flat on the table. Lauren began photographing, page by page, the lamplight strobing faintly across seals, stamps, and dates I had lined up like rivets on quiet weekends when order was the only thing that made sense. I watched my own handwriting parade under her lens. The slow signature I coached into my wrist after Julia died, the block dates in the upper corner because corners behave in folders, the margin notes I make to future me. The camera also saw the smaller mechanics. Lauren breathing slow to steady her hand, Evan glancing toward the hall at regular intervals like a trader watching a moving average. Somewhere off-screen, my mint tea cooled into a taste that would not comfort anyone. When the app found her voice, it sounded like a memo. If Dad changes the code, I've still got the spare. The words didn't accuse or justify. They simply installed themselves in the room. I scrolled back and let the sentence pass again the way you tap a beam and listen for the hollow note. I didn't pause the recording. A test must run to the end or you don't trust the data. Evan didn't look up. Hurry! Not fear. Calendar. He slid copies into a narrow envelope and squared the stack with the edge of his hand, neat as he was when he sold a story about sunlight and resale value. When he returned the yellow folder to the drawer, he left the corner proud by a hair. On a bridge, that hair becomes a crack you measure with a gauge. In a life, it becomes the thing you can't unsee. They drifted down the hall. In the kitchen, Lauren opened the refrigerator and lifted Julia's white wine. She read the label like you greet an old photograph, eyes softer than the day requires, then set the bottle back with care. It should have consoled me. It proved only that memory and mercy are not the same. At the door, Evan paused and stared just past the lens. He squinted into a light that wasn't there and for a second looked like a man who'd realized windows can also be mirrors. Lauren tapped her phone. The chime answered, polite as always. They stepped into the rain and out of the frame, and the house performed a small reflexive sigh before remembering what had just happened. The app returned to its twin panes. My kitchen felt colder by a degree that had nothing to do with weather. I replayed the sequence, then again with volume nudged up. The facts drew themselves like spans you could draft: entry by code or key, direct route to the file, photography of deeds and drafts, talk of notarizing and transfer, exit the way they came. My mind built 3 explanations and pushed each until something buckled: a misunderstanding, an overeager attempt to help, a deliberate trespass. The first 2 collapsed before they cleared the river. I opened the real drawer to check against the ghost one on my phone. The yellow corner sat a millimeter high, not a trick of light. I breathed, slid the folder flush, locked the drawer, and put the key in my pocket with the slow ceremony of starting a new habit I never wanted. I typed a message to Lauren and watched my own words as if they belonged to a stranger. We need to talk. Delete. Did you stop by? Delete. Call me. Delete. Questions you already know the answers to are traps you bait for yourself. I put the phone face down. The rain worked at the roof like a saw with a fresh blade. Julia would have told me to sleep and ask in the morning, to give my daughter the grace of a question asked in a full voice. I set my hand on the table, palm down, the way she steadied a cup when the Bainbridge ferry rolled. It helped, and it didn't. The house was listening to me decide how to be a father and how to be a man who keeps what he has built. Betrayal rarely arrives in costume. It wears a familiar coat and uses the right key. I stood, turned the deadbolt, tested the handle, and felt the click seat in the frame. The sound wrote itself in a file where engineers store warnings, not loud, not dramatic, but impossible to ignore. The night held and the rain kept time I could no longer pretend not to hear. If you're still here and curious about the small signs that something bigger is hiding beneath the surface, drop a number 2 in the comments. Now, let's step into Chapter 3 and watch the first real blow land. Late morning came the way Portland does after a long rain, a lighter gray, a little mercy through the clouds, and the smell of wet cedar climbing the porch steps before anyone knocked. The doorbell rang and I wiped my hands on a dish towel as if I'd been caught tinkering. Lauren stood there with a tidy smile that didn't lift the skin around her eyes. She carried a slim manila packet like a hostess carries menus. Out by the curb, Evan leaned against their car, phone to his ear, 1 foot marking time on the asphalt. The scene arranged itself without my help. Lauren stepped in, shook a mist of water from her hair, and set the packet on the table with the ceremony of good news. She narrated the headings in a just-the-facts tone: updated medical authorization, emergency contacts, a durable financial power everyone our age should have on file, and a small appendix requesting a document upload to confirm assets. There was a QR code printed neat and centered. I recognized the words, but not the way they were being used. I poured coffee and read the first page standing up. The language wore a friendly sweater while its hands reached for my pockets. Best interest discretion, broad authority, automatic renewal, third-party remote authentication. The appendix wanted a clear image of current deed and supporting pages for title verification. Lauren tapped the QR with her nail and told me it was faster than making copies. She kept her voice light and the pace brisk, like a salesperson trained to stay ahead of questions. I asked about the rush, and she offered a phrase about deadlines and tax windows that could have belonged to any year. She said the notary was a friend of Evan's and preferred wet signatures. I used the steadiness I used on bridge committees when someone proposed saving money on bearings. Maya will read them first, I said, placing the packet half an inch from the edge so it wouldn't slide. Lauren's expression tightened and softened in the same breath. She called Maya conservative and slow, in a way that suggested those were moral failings. Evan poked his head in, phone tucked to shoulder, and dropped a line as casual as a weather report about locking favorable terms. Then he drifted back to the curb, still talking to someone who could not possibly be more important than this room. I kept my tone warm and my sentence final. I asked Lauren to email PDFs so Maya could review without delay. She hedged, then smiled, then hedged again. I walked the packet to the counter and promised to read it line by line before dinner. We said goodbye as if the visit had been an errand of care. At the car, Lauren checked her own phone before she looked up. I logged the detail and shut the door quietly. By evening, the drizzle returned, sewing small silver stitches across the river. I set the packet under the lamp and laid out pencil, ruler, sticky flags, my old inspection kit for a different kind of load. Clause by clause, I marked the places where a word might slip its leash. Dispose of real property without limitation. Act in grantor's best interest as determined by agent. Irrevocable upon execution. Authentication via trusted identity vendor. No independent counsel for me, no second signer for major transactions, no prohibition against selling a primary residence without an external appraisal. The paper wanted me to trust a process designed to function best without me. I did what engineers do when a drawing assumes too much. I wrote questions in the margins and circled the assumptions till they looked strange even to themselves. I walked to the workroom and opened the metal drawer to compare memory with matter. The yellow folder sat a hair proud. I reseated it until the tab was flush, then turned the key and slid it into my pocket. I took quick phone snapshots of a few risky pages and drafted an email to Maya with neutral subject lines and no accusations. I did not click send. The decision lived better in the morning light. I adjusted the camera settings instead, widened the motion zones, dropped the sensitivity threshold one notch, and set the phone on the counter screen up like a night watchman. The house was quiet in the way of houses that know they're being watched. I drank mint tea made from the second pour of the kettle, dull but warm, and read my notes twice. The packet waited polite and patient on the table, as if the words on it could nap until I was ready to be persuaded. I said one sentence aloud because old habits find their way out even when you aren't staging a performance. Not tonight. The room accepted the rule and said nothing back. At 1:03, the phone kissed the counter with its small haptic. Motion detected. Backyard. The frame opened to a sweep of angled light as if someone grazed the lens with a flashlight while deciding whether to point it at the house. Two shapes moved at the edge, then stepped out of view. 90 seconds, start to finish. The audio carried only rain. I stood with my thumb hovering over 911 and counted to 8, long enough to measure breath and intent. No forced entry, no handle twitch. The clip ended on wet flagstones and distant freeway hum. I walked to the front door, rested my palm on the deadbolt, and turned until the seated click confirmed what I already knew. The spare key rack hung in its familiar place by the frame, 4 labeled hooks lined like notes on a staff. Boat, shed, mailbox, house. The house hook shone empty. I didn't gasp. I didn't call a name to an empty room. I recognized a missing piece and wrote it down inside myself the way we once logged hairline cracks with date and temperature. Back in the kitchen, I exported the motion clip and emailed it to myself with a plain subject. 1:03 a.m. backyard. The app's green dots held steady. I turned the manila packet so the QR code faced down. I left the phone charging within reach and checked window latches the way you check a child's blanket once more before turning off the lamp. The night had the strangely lucid feeling of a ferry between shores. You can see both banks and commit to neither. I wasn't going to confront anyone at 1:15 in the morning while the house was learning new angles. I was going to collect, not accuse. In the morning, I would send Maya the documents with my flags, then call Dr. Nguyen for a routine check and put my version of events on the record before someone else wrote their own. People love to offer concern when the story belongs to them. I rinsed the cup, turned off the lamp, and stood a moment with the darkness, making sure it was only darkness. In my pocket, the single key pressed its shape against my thigh, a small hard promise that felt heavier than metal. The rain worked at the roof, steady as a saw with a fresh blade. I let it count for me, and when the count felt right, I chose sleep over speculation and set my hand palm down on the table, quiet like the start of a test I intended to finish. If you're still watching and the shock of betrayal hit you as hard as it did Daniel, type number 3 below so I know you feel it too. Now, let's see in Chapter 4 how he tries, and fails, to take control. Morning opened the house like a careful hand, rinsed light on the counters, the porch drying in uneven patches where cedar held the night. I arrived at Dr. Nguyen's office a few minutes early and filled the clipboard with the patience of a man who knows how forms get used against you. Mood, confusion, falls, small checkboxes that could be made to sound like shadows if someone wanted them to. In the exam room, the HVAC hummed a low, neutral note. Dr. Nguyen greeted me with that steady, unfussy kindness I trust, then set a timer and moved me through a series of tasks. Orientation, recall after delay, drawing a clock, trail making, stroop, word fluency. My hands remembered precision. My mind held the names, the sequence, the shapes that should live together. When we finished, she smiled like a teacher reading an answer key. She said my scores were strong for my age, no signs of decline, nothing in the pattern to suggest trouble. I asked for it in writing. She promised a signed report in the patient portal today, time-stamped, with a short letter I could show if anyone questioned capacity. Document your decisions, she added. Let the paper defend you before you need a person to. I walked from the clinic to Judge Patel's bungalow 3 blocks off the river, a book-lined living room that smelled like wood polish and rain. He listened with his fingertips resting on a rook, the old habit of holding your next move. I didn't dramatize, just gave him times, actions, words, what I'd seen and what I could prove. He said to sign nothing, surrender nothing, and let no original leave my possession. Keep a contemporaneous log, date, time, who, what, where, how I responded. Then he handed me a small phrase and told me to keep it in my mouth like a coin. I'll review with my counsel. Say it, then stop talking. He also suggested I alert my financial institutions and title company, fraud flags, callback verification, and a note that any remote notarization under my name should be considered suspicious. On his end table, a card, Carter Hale, Bank Investigations, waited like a tool I might need by dusk. Back home, I made the first calls. I emailed Maya a handful of pages from the packet with no heat in the subject line, just a request for a risk summary and a template of guardrails we both like. Dual signatures for large transactions. No sale of primary residence without independent appraisal and outside counsel. Explicit revocation triggers. I asked if she could tell me what the language wanted me to believe and what it would actually do. Then I phoned Carter and introduced myself as a cautious client, not a crisis. I asked for a sweep, any recent pulls on my credit, any liens or inquiries on the property, and a confirmation of the email and phone on file for identity checks. He took notes briskly and said he'd start now. If anything pings, I'll call, he said. I wrote his promise and the time beside it in my log. By late afternoon, the packet sat under the lamp, flags bright as buoys. I invited Lauren to the diner with the chrome-edged booths and the view of freight cars sliding under the bridge. I chose public air on purpose, room for the temperature to stay reasonable. We ordered without thinking, grilled cheese for her, meatloaf for me, 2 coffees. I let the conversation be small and true. The boys I used to mentor winning a regional meet, a memory of Julia's Way with pie crust, the rain due again. When money came up in a sideways way, Lauren's leg bounced once beneath the table and stilled. I mentioned, as if it belonged with the weather, that I'd sent the documents to Maya. A fractional pause, then a smile, a little thinner than usual. She called Maya careful, not slow, and said, "Whatever makes you comfortable." I told her no signatures until review. She nodded. Her jaw said something different. I paid cash, pocketed the receipt, and noted the time like an old habit sliding into armor. Night brought rain back in a finer grain, a sound that sands the edges off a house. I updated my log with the clinic results, the judge's advice, the diner scene, the small tells you only notice if you plan to remember. Then the phone lit and hummed. Carter. His voice was composed but carrying an urgency a trained ear does not ignore. He'd found an active inquiry for a home equity line, a HELOC initiated through remote online notarization under my name. The notary on the session, a Vince R. I felt the name before I remembered where I'd heard it. The identity verification email hadn't gone to my current addresses. It had been routed to an old secondary account I'd used once when Lauren was applying to college. An address I'd never given a bank, an address only she would know. Carter had already placed a temporary hold and flagged the file for fraud review. He asked me to confirm that I had not authorized any HELOC, any remote notarization, any change to contact information. No, I said, and the word felt like a rib reseating. He promised to send me the incident number, the timestamps, and any IP metadata the system captured. He recommended I freeze my credit with all 3 bureaus and call the title company to confirm mailing addresses on record. I thanked him and meant it, then saved his voicemail to the cloud and screenshotted the case number into my journal. The clinic report arrived as a PDF while I was still standing at the counter. I printed a copy and slid it into a fresh red folder labeled Capacity, Current, then mirrored the file to a drive that doesn't share. The packet from Lauren remained where I had left it, 2 flags marking the clauses that tried to sound like help and read like leverage. I turned the QR code face down again and checked the key rack. The house hook stayed empty, a clean absence in a line of labeled metal. I put the remaining key in my pocket and felt its outline against my thigh, the way you feel a tool answer your palm when you're about to use it. I didn't call anyone back that night. I didn't pick a fight to make sleep impossible. I wrote the day into the log, dates and times and phrases, and what I had done to keep the shape of my life intact. The rain laid its long hand over the roof, the cameras blinked green. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a train sounded its low, factual horn. I stood with the quiet and thought about bridges, how you don't panic when you hear a new noise. You catalog, you measure, you tighten the bolts you control and mark the ones you don't. Then you decide what load the structure can safely carry, and you don't let anyone bully you into pretending it's more. If you're still here and sensing how each failed attempt only pulls Daniel deeper into danger, comment number 4 so I know you're following every turn. Next, we'll push into Chapter 5, where the conflict explodes. Saturday arrived rinsed and cool, a Portland day that kept its voice down. I set the dining table the way I once set a temporary workbench on a job site. Everything in reach, nothing ornamental. The manila packet lay opened and flagged, clauses bracketed in pencil. On top of it, I placed Dr. Nguyen's signed report in a red folder labeled Capacity, Current. Beside it, Maya's email, printed, highlighted where she'd suggested dual signatures, independent appraisal for any sale of the primary residence, explicit revocation triggers, and a ban on remote notarization without counsel present. Carter's incident number was clipped to a legal pad. My phone waited between the mugs, voice memos already recording, its red bar a small, steady heartbeat. The house felt like a courtroom the public doesn't see, quiet, intentional, no gallery. I texted Lauren, "Let's review together, page by page. Keep it simple." She replied with a single thumbs up. When the doorbell sounded, I took a breath long enough to file away the urge to lead with what I knew. Coats dripped in the entry, Lauren smelled like rain and vanilla, Evan like cologne, and a deadline. I offered tea or coffee. We sat. I proposed rules the way an engineer proposes a load test. I would read each clause aloud, ask for a plain English restatement, and write a 1-sentence summary of any decision implied. We would move in order. We would not sign. I said it calmly and wrote it at the top of the legal pad, "No signatures today." Lauren smiled like that was reasonable. Evan set his hands flat on the table the way salesmen do when they want to look trustworthy. We began with the innocuous, emergency contacts, allergy lists, a page of initials acknowledging receipt of copies. All fine. The pace settled into something that felt almost domestic until we reached the hinge of the packet. Durable financial power, best interest disposition, authority over real property. I rested each sentence in the air and waited for their versions. Lauren's language was polished. protection, convenience, flexibility. She had practiced sounding helpful. Evan called it standard boilerplate and suggested we skip to signatures and add amendments later. I moved slower. The lamplight held the little scene steady. I slid Dr. Nguyen's report into the center and turned it so they could read the first line. Cognitive evaluation consistent with full capacity. No evidence of decline. The signature was bold, the date yesterday. No one said the word confusion anymore. I didn't comment. I simply left the report where it removed an avenue. Then I set down Maya's notes, sentences in a different color that carried a different temperature. She recommended explicit guardrails, dual signers for any transfer of real property, an outside appraisal, independent counsel retained by me, a clause that blocks remote online notarization for estate or property actions unless my counsel is present, and an automatic revocation provision if any party attempts to alter contact information with institutions without my written approval. I asked to add them. I said the way we do this is amendments first, signatures last. The pen lay across the page like a gate. I introduced Carter's fact the way you introduce a data point on a long span. A bank safeguard triggered this week. A routine review found an attempted home equity line under my name initiated by remote notary. An incident number exists. The account is on hold pending investigation. I spoke without accusation, then placed the slip with the number on the table. Evan's posture stilled like a runner at the line hearing a starting pistol a second too soon. Lauren's shoulders edged up an inch. Neither reached for the paper. The doorbell chimed again. I walked to the entry. Judge Patel stood with a hardcover wrapped in a plastic bag against the weather. Left this on my porch by mistake, he said. We both understood what this visit was. He stepped in for tea, shook Evan's hand, and took a seat not quite at the table. His presence changed the room the way a level changes your sense of whether a shelf is straight. Sentences grew tidier. Adverbs fled. We continued. Where the packet read, dispose of real property as the agent deems in the principal's best interest, I asked, tell me in plain English what that lets you do. Lauren said it meant helping me act quickly in emergencies. I wrote, it grants unilateral sale authority. Next section, irrevocable upon execution. Evan called it typical for efficiency. I wrote, it cannot be undone without court. Where it allowed authentication via trusted identity vendor, I asked for names. Evan said, industry standard. I wrote, number, names required, counsel present. I repeated my boundary phrase once, gently, and watched Patel's mouth crease like someone marking a right answer. I'll review with my counsel, I said. I wrote it under no signatures today. Lauren suggested a sensible compromise. Sign now, amend later. It's protection, Dad. I shook my head. Amendments first, I said. Protection with terms. Evan called the HELOC hold bank overreach and assured me it would sort itself. I nodded at the incident slip. The hold remains until counsel clears it, I said. The recorder's red bar kept burning. I requested PDFs sent directly to Maya and to my attorney, plus contact information for the notary who would be involved if there were to be any notarization at all. I wrote a deadline for delivery, Monday 10 a.m. I summarized our session out loud, date, time, attendees, documents reviewed, amendments requested, outside counsel engaged, next steps. I asked if my summary matched their understanding. Lauren said yes with the softness of someone signing for a package. Evan said, that's our understanding. I emailed the summary to all of us from my phone, CCing Maya and Carter, subject line, family review, requested amendments, no signatures executed. The whoosh sounded loud. Patel sipped tea and set his cup down without a ring. Coates went back on. At the door, Evan let his eyes flick toward the hallway camera and then away. I opened the door and rain made its quiet case for patience. They left with controlled politeness. Patel stood, squeezed my shoulder once, left the book on the sideboard, and said he'd check in Sunday. He didn't need to say more. The point had been made simply by staying. I returned to the table. The red folder on top, the incident slip below, the flagged packet waiting like a problem set that had lost its bluff. I filed Dr. Nguyen's report back into capacity, current, and put Maya's notes above the manila. I drew a line through no signatures today and wrote it again, darker. I checked the drawer lock, felt the key in my pocket, and listened to the voice memo tick past 2 hours. The house took back its shape by degrees. Everything that mattered was on paper, on record, and under light. The fiction had thinned. The span still held. After they left, the house took a long breath and gave it back to me. The lamplight made a clean circle on the table. The red capacity, current folder, steady over the flagged packet like a stoplight over a busy intersection. I stood there with my palms on the chair back, feeling the tremor in the wood die down. On jobs, we always did this part, the quiet after a load test, when you decide what the span can truly carry. I wrote the decision at the top of my log in block letters and underlined twice. Amendments or nothing. Counsel in the room. No remote notarization. I opened my laptop and drafted a follow-up email while the afternoon weather thinned into a paler gray. Bullet points, not stories. Guardrails, Maya specified. The Monday 10 a.m. deadline for PDFs to be sent directly to her and to my attorney. A line that any notarial act would occur in person at my counsel's office. A statement that remote online notarization is off the table. I attached Dr. Nguyen's report and Maya's preliminary notes, then attached the session summary I'd already sent from the phone. Before hitting send, I saved the voice memo to the cloud, exported a read-only copy, and wrote the file hash into my paper log. Integrity is a habit you cultivate before you need it. I sealed printed copies in an envelope labeled Incident Materials, Session 1, and placed it near the door for off-site storage. The phone buzzed, not a motion alert, but something else. An unfamiliar notification rose like a periscope over the lock screen. Unknown tracker moving with you. I stared at the phrase until the air changed temperature. I don't own any tracking tags. I don't loan my keys. Another buzz, closer now. I took a slow breath, toggled the Find Nearby feature on an old iPad I keep for sketches, and watched the signal strength bars climb as I walked the hallway toward the key rack and the small wall safe behind it. The bars peaked. I crouched, ran a hand along the baseboard, felt tape under the crown of my knuckles. A coin-sized disc sat tucked behind the key rack's backplate, held by painter's tape neat as a bandage. Fresh battery, no dust. I didn't pull it immediately. First, I photographed the scene wide and then close. A ruler in frame for scale, the serial number legible. I put on nitrile gloves, eased the device free, photographed my gloved hand holding it, then dropped it into a Ziploc bag and wrote the time, location, and handling notes in the log. Chain of custody isn't just for courtrooms. It's for not being gaslit later about what you saw and how you saw it. The implication sat on my tongue like metal. It could track my movements. It could also be spun easily into a story where I was the one doing the tracking. Flip the device, flip the narrative. I set the Ziploc on a steel baking sheet to quiet its voice, then took screenshots of the system alerts with timestamps and device names. I disabled Bluetooth tracking on my personal phone, left it on the iPad, and watched the signal drop to a faint heartbeat. Then I wrote an email to Carter with a subject I'd want a jury to believe. Found tracker near safe, photos and serial attached. I included the serial, the photos, the log excerpt, and a simple request. Please correlate the alert times with the HELOC attempt and any account contact changes your trace captured. Within a minute, an automated reply gave me a new incident number. I taped that number into the log beside the first. I sent a second note to Maya and Judge Patel, a brief factual paragraph with 2 images and a line proposing we fold the device into any broader complaint if amendments didn't arrive by Monday. I printed the serial and tucked a copy into the red folder. The bagged tracker went into a small lockbox separate from the safe. A stupid detail maybe, but I wanted the geometry right. The thing meant to find me contained, the documents untouched. For the sake of courtesy and record, I messaged Lauren a single sentence she could not misread. Please send PDFs to Maya and my attorney tonight. In-person notary only. The reply came slower than her usual cadence. Will do in the morning. I logged her response time and wording without comment and turned back to the parts of the house that still listened to me. I pulled up camera clips from the last 48 hours and scrubbed through hall frames. Twice, the lens caught shadows lingering longer than it takes to hang a coat. I bookmarked both, exported copies, and mirrored them to the cloud and a thumb drive. I rotated the door code, deleted old guest entries, and revoked keypad history sharing to any device but mine. Then I froze my credit at all 3 bureaus and set title alerts with the company we used when Julia and I refinanced. Confirmation numbers went into the log. If anyone tugged on the paper of my life, I wanted the tug to trip an alarm I didn't have to be awake to hear. I wrote a templated cease and desist, not to send yet, but to know I could. Courteous, specific, anchored in incident numbers, amendments demanded, and counsel engaged. I printed it and slid it behind the front page of the log. The practice soothed me more than mint tea. It felt right to speak the line out loud in the quiet room, to make the promise a thing with air on it. Amendments first. Counsel present. No remote notarization. The words sounded like a checklist you recite before you plug a test instrument into live current. Not a curse, not even a warning. Procedure. I stepped onto the porch with the lockbox under my arm and watched the river change its color with the light. Rain had thinned to a careful mist. Somewhere upriver, a barge horn made a low, reasonable sound. I stored the envelope off-site and came back to a house that looked exactly like itself. Inside, the red folder sat where I'd left it, bright as a brake light, and the manila packet beneath looked less like a script I was supposed to follow and more like a document awaiting revision. The baking sheet with the bagged device looked almost domestic on the counter, as if I'd set out ingredients for a pie. I breathed and felt the single house key press its certainty against my thigh. A structure isn't brave. It is honest about load. Mine would be too. I checked the window latches once more, the kind gesture you make to a room before leaving it to the night, and turned off the lamp. The house held. The line I had chosen held with it. If you're still watching and can feel the weight of Daniel's impossible choice pressing down, comment number 6 so I know you're right here with me. Now, let's uncover what happens after that decision in Chapter 7. Sunday arrived gray and serviceable, the kind of morning that helps you do paperwork without feeling punished. I turned the kitchen into a small command post, printer humming, legal pads stacked, the red capacity, current folder on my left like a compass. I began with the one agency built exactly for days like this. The Adult Protective Services portal asked for a timeline, so I gave it one. Dates, times, the HELOC incident number, screenshots of the camera clips, photos of the tracker with its serial, and Dr. Nguyen's report. No adjectives. I attached the summary email from our review and the sentence I will not cross. No signatures without amendments and counsel present. When the site produced a confirmation code, I printed the receipt and slid it into a clear sleeve. Paper that acknowledges itself is a quiet kind of relief. Next, I wrote the title company. I attached the APS receipt and the bank incident number and requested a fraud watch on the deed. I asked them to confirm mailing addresses on record and to require in-person identity verification for any transfer. I did not mention names. The reply came faster than I expected. Polite, somber, and specific. They would flag my file, lock digital notifications, and call me at 2 numbers before acting on anything. I printed that email and tucked it behind the APS receipt. The patient portal pinged. Dr. Nguyen had posted the signed cognitive report and a short clinician letter, polite, exact, the sort of document that seems to stand up straight on the page. I downloaded, printed 2 copies, and filed them into the red folder. The kitchen felt steadier with those pages in the house. I made coffee and called Carter at the bank. He answered on the second ring and kept his voice like a level set on a beam. Freeze expanded, sharing a limited dossier with state investigators with your permission. I said, yes. Please proceed. He asked me to retain the tracker as potential evidence and to keep my chain of custody notes current. I told him the device was bagged, labeled, and locked. By noon, Maya's email arrived with a red line. She embedded the guardrails we sketched and added 2 more. No change to contact credentials without a notarized letter from my counsel. An explicit ban on remote notarization for estate or property actions. Then she condensed the protections into a 1-page family protection addendum. Plain terms, no wiggle. I printed it, read it twice, and forwarded the draft to Lauren and Evan with a neutral line. Please review. If agreeable, we can schedule an in-person signing at my attorney's office. I copied counsel, Carter, and Judge Patel. I let the paper speak so my voice didn't have to. Early afternoon brought the first counterpunch. An unknown number left a voicemail accusing me of privacy invasion and tracking relatives with the device. I saved the audio, transcribed it in my log, and emailed both to Carter and Patel with the tracker photos and timestamps attached. I did not call back. Minutes later, a text from Lauren arrived. This is getting out of hand. We were trying to help, I replied with the phrase Patel gave me and a link to Maya's addendum. I'll review with my counsel. Please see the addendum, not an argument, a path. An hour after that, an email from Evan arrived, all push and varnish. Bank overreacting, sign originals today, fix later. I forwarded it to Maya for the file and answered no further. I will not debate the weather with people who carry their own barometers. I spent the next hour on evidence hygiene. I exported the last 72 hours of hallway and entry footage, mirrored the files to 2 drives in the cloud, and wrote the hashes into my paper log. The rhythm calmed me in ways coffee never will. When the printer cooled, I called Patel and asked him to stop by around dusk with the pretext of returning a book. A neighbor's presence carries a civic weight that can't be faked on paper. He said he would, and that was all. At the front door, I taped a 1-page house access policy. Entry by appointment only. No unattended access. All documents by email to counsel. Packages to be left outside. The note looked almost cheerful in the Sunday light. I rotated the keypad code again, deleted every guest entry I could find, and paused a moment to feel the grain of the deadbolt seat. This is how a house learns its new rules, not by shouting, but by repetition. By late afternoon, I wrote a contingency tree and scheduled it to send at 9 if no PDFs arrived. Path A, if they accept Maya's addendum by Monday at 10, we proceed to an in-person counsel-supervised signing. The bank freeze remains until completion. Path B, if they miss or refuse, I convert the APS intake to a formal complaint, authorize the bank to escalate, instruct counsel to begin civil protective action, and request a no-contact boundary if necessary. I wrote the steps as if assembling a kit, numbered, labeled, no extra parts. Then I prepared for the possibility that documents disappear people. 2 envelopes, one for Patel and one for Maya, each labeled, "If I go quiet 24 hours." Open. Inside, a USB with the hallway clips, the session audio hash, the addendum, the APS receipt, and a copy of Dr. Nguyen's report. I sealed them and placed them by the door under my raincoat. Contingency should feel dull. If it thrills you, you're doing it wrong. Before dinner, I called Dr. Nguyen to thank her. She kept it brief. Let the paper defend you. Let your routine defend your mind. I wrote that sentence at the bottom of the page and underlined it. The light outside cooled toward pewter. I checked the lockbox. The tracker sat sealed, serial visible. I countersigned my own log entry with date and time. The act felt slightly theatrical and completely necessary. At dusk, Patel knocked with a novel wrapped in a grocery bag and a look that said he understood the uses of performance. We traded neighborhood talk on the porch where cameras could see our smiles. He saw the house access note and nodded once. No speeches. The message was the scene itself. A house with witnesses, a day behaving like a record. Evening thinned into a quieter gray. I cleared the table and set the family protection addendum under the red folder with a pen laid diagonally like a crossing bar on a railway. In the window, the river darkened to graphite. The phone lay face down, scheduled email asleep inside it like a fuse that might never need to burn. I rinsed a cup, checked the door once more, and stood with the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for anything. I had turned doubt into structure. The span would hold because I had given it the right load and refused the rest. Tomorrow would decide which path we take. Tonight the house knew my terms, and so did I. Monday held itself as if it knew a bell would ring at 10. I set the red folder and the family protection addendum side by side, a pen laid across them like a gate. The house was bright and ordinary, printer warmed, coffee made, a checklist clipped to a legal pad. When the clock on the stove rolled to 10 a.m., my phone stayed quiet. No PDFs from Lauren or Evan. I let the scheduled message go on its own. Path be activated, factual numbered, without adjectives, APS escalation, bank escalation, civil protective action prepared, potential no-contact boundary if needed. I exported the sent email as a PDF, wrote its hash into my log, and printed a copy for a new envelope labeled Session 2. The phone rang before the printer cooled. Carter. His voice carried the efficient kindness of someone moving a heavy object in straight lines. Overnight, the bank's freeze had blocked a second HELOC attempt, same remote notary vendor ID, Vince R. He gave me a new sub-incident number, asked if he could loop in postal inspectors should we see any mail tampering. Yes, I said, please proceed. We hung up and the room felt like a span gaining another brace. Maya joined by speaker, crisp as glass. She had drafted a standstill agreement, no financial or property actions by any party, communications through counsel only, breach triggers and immediate injunction filing. We would present it together with the family protection addendum at an in-person session in her office with a vetted notary unrelated to anyone I know. Stand still first, then your guardrails, she said. I heard a printer on her end begin to sing. I pictured the pages stacking with their own gravity. Judge Patel called from his porch. City sounds soft behind him. He recommended parallel prep for an emergency injunction, templates, affidavits, exhibits, tracker photos, bank incidents, capacity report, APS receipt, my house access policy by the door. Have them ready whether you need them or not, he said. I wrote it down because I like seeing the advice turn into ink. At 11:12 a.m., a new email from USPS slid into my inbox with the authority only federal formatting can convey action required. Change of address request processed. I hadn't filed anything. I opened the notice and felt the temperature of the kitchen drop half a degree. A P.O. box across town, rental station name, date and time. I called the postal inspector hotline and followed the prompts the way I follow a well-drawn detour. Steadiness first, speed later. The agent opened a mail fraud and identity theft case, gave me a PI number, and flagged the P.O. box for inspection. She told me to bring ID to my post office to lock my address, PS Form 8076, and to retain every notice. Jurisdiction widened like a river after rain. I uploaded the USPS notice, bank incident numbers, tracker serial photos, and the APS receipt to their portal before the call ended. Then I copied Maya and Carter with the case number. The story no longer lived only in my kitchen. We drafted the meeting invite immediately, Wednesday 11 a.m., counsel's office downtown, in person only, notary provided by counsel, agenda limited to standstill agreement and family protection addendum. No other documents would be discussed or signed, originals remain with me, all sessions recorded by counsel, remote notarization expressly prohibited. We CC'd Carter, the postal inspector case contact, and Judge Patel. I read the email aloud once, the way you read a bridge plaque out loud to honor what holds you up, and sent it. Evidence belongs to a net, not a pile. I assembled Exhibit Set A, Dr. Nguyen's report and brief letter, APS filing and receipt, all bank incident logs, tracker photos and serial, the house access policy, the USPS change of address notice, my logs with hashes. I drafted an affidavit for the injunction, dates and facts only, exhibit list appended. I called Patel to ask if he could witness Wednesday's session. He said yes. Maya confirmed she had a neutral notary vetted by her firm standing by. The plan became a corridor you could walk without hitting your head. Counter-narratives arrived on schedule. A text from Lauren asked why we needed lawyers again and suggested we could do this as a family. I answered with the sentence that saves me from performance. I'll review with my counsel. All actions at counsel's office Wednesday, 11 a.m. An email from Evan CC'd a friend attorney hinting at elder incapacity concerns. I forwarded it to Maya without comment. Her reply, counsel to counsel, attached Dr. Nguyen's report and the standstill draft. Around noon, a voicemail with the cadence of a robocall suggested someone might request a wellness check at my address. I saved the audio, logged the time, and forwarded it to APS and Carter. If someone wanted to test narratives, they would meet paper before they met me. After lunch, I went to the post office with my passport and a copy of the USPS notice. The clerk had the weary grace of people who hand strangers their names back every day. I filed PS Form 8076 to lock my address against forwarding, obtained a receipt, and scanned it when I got home. The act felt small but exact, like tightening a bolt you can see without guessing its torque. Back at the table, I placed fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus in addition to the freezes and confirmed text and email title alerts. I built a mirrored cloud folder, read only, shared with Maya, Carter, and Patel. Exhibits A, affidavit draft, hashes, Wednesday agenda, copies of every receipt. I labeled it with the date the way surveyors label stakes, so that when you come back, the earth hasn't moved under your feet without telling you. Toward evening, I practiced the meeting aloud, page by page, not for drama, but for fluency. Standstill Section 1, Plain English Restatement. Addendum Clause A, my guardrail. Clause B, dual signatures. Clause C, no sale of primary residence without independent appraisal and counsel. No improvisation tomorrow. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb for everyone except 5 names: Maya, Carter, Patel, Dr. Nguyen, Postal Inspector. The whitelisted ring sounded once as a test and then fell silent. I clipped the USPS notice to the outside of the red folder, not because I needed the reminder, but because I wanted the hierarchy visible. Capacity verified, mail fraud engaged, financial freeze active, family addendum ready, standstill first. I cleaned the counter, set the pen back across the top sheet, and felt the house settle its weight onto the plans like a structure finding its bearings. Outside, the river moved with the same quiet it always uses when the city thinks it's busy. I stood at the window and watched 2 gulls argue a line of current only they could read. Wednesday at 11, I said, softly, not to the birds, not exactly to myself. A sentence can be a stake in the ground. Inside, the folders waited, and the printer clicked as it cooled. This was not a family misunderstanding anymore. It was a corridor of law arranged with care, and I had chosen to walk it with people whose signatures meant something. The span would carry the load. I had designed it that way. If you're still here and holding on to the hope that Daniel might finally find a way forward, type number 8 below so I know you're walking this path too. Next comes Chapter 9, where the story heads toward its final reckoning. I arrived 30 minutes early, because that is how you keep a bridge from vibrating on opening day. Maya's conference room was glass and quiet, the kind of space that makes paper sound like a promise. She had laid out the corridor we built: standstill agreement on the left, family protection addendum on the right, water glasses squared to the table's edge, an audio recorder already blinking its small red certainty. The notary signed her journal's first line and dated the page. I set my red capacity, current folder down, and felt the room settle around it. We reviewed the ground in a voice meant for calm. Standstill first. Addendum next, no other papers. No phones recording except counsel's. Plain English restatements, one person speaking at a time. I read the agenda once, the way a pilot reads back clearances, not to impress but to align. In the waiting area through the frosted band of glass, Judge Patel sat with a paperback and a view of the hall. On my phone, Carter texted "freeze intact, ready if needed," and I put the screen face down. At 10:58, the door opened. Lauren and Evan came in holding their coats like shields they wanted to appear as coats. The receptionist gave them the code of conduct on a single sheet, and the notary asked for IDS. She wrote their names, time, and our case references in her book, pen moving with the undisturbed cadence of someone used to collisions happening somewhere else. Maya clicked the recorder's gain a notch. We began. Maya read the standstill agreement aloud, each clause followed by its plain meaning. No financial or property actions by any party. No remote notarization of anything touching deed, title, or estate. All communications through counsel. Violation triggers an immediate injunction filing, exhibits attached. She placed the incidents by number on the table as she spoke, the 2 HELOC attempts blocked by the bank's freeze, the tracker serial, Dr. Nguyen's capacity report, the APS receipt, the USPS change of address notice. They formed a small, disciplined perimeter. Evan called the document overkill. The tone almost bored, but his jaw had a new angle to it. Maya did not lift her eyes from the text. She read the trigger clause again. Lauren's shoulders drew a half-inch higher and stopped. We invited Patel in. He nodded to the notary, sat at one end of the table, and placed his paperback closed and square before him, a wordless metronome for sentences that should not rush. The air shifted. We moved on to the addendum. I had practiced the clauses at home until they fit my mouth. Dual signatures for any transfer or encumbrance on real property. No sale of primary residence without independent appraisal and independent counsel. No changes to contact credentials with any institution without a notarized letter from my counsel. In-person notary only, unrelated to any party here, arranged by Maya's office. Automatic revocation triggers if anyone tries to route identity verifications around these rules. I said the boundary once and let it stay on the table. No signatures without these terms. It wasn't a warning, it was a statement of load capacity. Maya's alternatives were clean, sign both documents now, and we schedule a separate family mediation to talk about anything else. Or decline, and she files the injunction packet already assembled in her briefcase. Affidavit, exhibits, and a proposed temporary restraining order on contacts and property actions. Carter would then keep the freezes under court order. The postal inspector would continue mail fraud work with subpoenas for the P.O. box. APS would convert intake to formal investigation. We took a 10-minute recess. From the hallway, I could see their reflection in the glass. 2 people I loved arguing in a lowered register we could not hear. Lauren rubbed at her ring finger as if it itched under metal. Evan scrolled his phone, then stopped, then scrolled again. The notary refilled the water pitcher and noted the time. Patel turned a page without reading it. They came back in at 11:26 with faces trying to be unremarkable. Lauren looked at Maya, then at me, and finally at the recorder. "We'll sign the standstill," she said softly. Evan nodded, a quick tilt, the movement of a man adjusting to friction he can't sell his way around. We returned to our seats. The notary took control of the mechanics with a steadiness I admired. She asked each of us to state our full names for the record and verified the titles of the documents. Maya read the standstill again, slower, and Lauren signed first, then Evan, then me. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted the symmetry in the book. The notary stamped the page, her seal pressing time into paper. Then the addendum, clause by clause, in the same order, with the same plain English restatements. "Do you understand?" she asked each time. They said yes, they signed. The seal came down again, a second small weather system turning pressure into proof. Patel stood and shook the notary's hand like a colleague. Carter's email arrived before we left the room, written confirmation that my profile would carry a permanent note. No remote notarizations accepted for me without a written order from my counsel. The title company joined by secure video to confirm the fraud watch on the deed and the in-person identity requirement. The postal inspector's acknowledgement of an open federal case landed in Maya's inbox as a short formal paragraph with the agency's gravity in its font. The corridor had doors that locked behind us as we walked through, and that was by design. Outside the building, the wind had a hand in it. I walked a block along the river before heading to my car, letting the day cool off me. Relief came with edges. Love did not become dislike, but it moved farther away from the center of the map. When I got home, I filed the signed standstill and addendum in the red folder, updated the incident log with timestamps, witness names, journal page numbers, and the notary seal ID. I scanned everything to the cloud mirror and slid a copy into the offsite envelope. The manila packet that had started this lay under the new weight like a blueprint for a bridge we chose not to build. At the door, I took down the house access policy and put it in a file instead of a trash bin. The door code stayed changed. I stood in my workroom, locked the drawer, and set the key down long enough to feel that I could pick it up without dread. I texted Lauren one line we agreed counsel would approve. Documents filed. Next step is mediation. I hope we use it well. The camera's green indicator washed the room in a small, factual glow. Outside, the river kept saying what it always says when people shout, "Keep your shape, carry what you can, move on." The table was clear. The span held. A week after the conference room and the seals, the house felt lighter in ways you can't measure with a scale. I thinned the command post back to a life. The red folder and a slim sleeve labeled "Open Cases," nothing stacked, nothing poised to topple. The cloud mirrors showed green checks across every directory. I wrote the final index page in my incident log. Exhibits by number, seal IDs, case numbers for bank, title, USPS, APS. I drew a line beneath the list and dated it. Log closed unless reopened. The act of stopping felt as deliberate as every start I'd made. 3 calls rounded the edges on the morning. Carter first. No new pings, the freeze stubborn in all the right ways, my profile carrying a permanent note about remote notarization. The title company reconfirmed the fraud watch on the deed and the requirement for in-person identity verification. They added a reminder that their calls would come from 2 known numbers only. The postal inspector's office reported the P.O. box flagged and the renter identity under review. I added the note to the margin rather than opening a fresh page. APS acknowledged compliance under the standstill and asked me to send any changes in writing through counsel. Boxes checked, not lives. Mediation came next, a shorter room with calm chairs and a facilitator who looked like someone's favorite aunt. No theatrics, no speeches, just 2 questions written on the glass wall in a dry hand. What's safe? What will you do differently? I answered first to get the line on the table. Safety first. Closeness if earned. The words didn't expand the room. They simply shaped it. I asked for practical repair, a written apology naming the attempted HELOC and the change of address harm, and reimbursement of my legal and bank costs from Evan on a schedule counsel could supervise. Lauren said she would put counseling on her calendar and write the letter. Evan agreed to the repayment plan because paper makes some choices clearer than character alone. Contact would stay structured, public places, scheduled times for 6 months. No victory dance, just a path that would hold weight without drama. Inside the house, I kept the cameras but demoted the app tile on my phone. Routine, not surveillance. The green dots could be quiet evidence again instead of prayer beads. On the fridge, I taped a one-page family access charter that said what the last months had taught me to say without heat. Visits by appointment, documents through counsel, emergencies welcomed, not exploited. Lauren and I met for coffee in a public park one crisp morning. We kept it brief and kind and bounded. She thanked me for the corridor, not the forgiveness, and I understood it as the compliment it was. Gratitude for a safe path, not an erasure of harm. The letter came on a Thursday in careful cursive, one page thick enough to take ink. Lauren did not excuse. She named pressure, fear, complicity, and the way urgency had masqueraded as right. I confused urgency with right. "I'm sorry," she wrote. She asked to earn trust by behavior over time. I filed the letter behind the addendum and did not reread the old manila packet. You don't keep the blueprint for the bridge you chose not to build on the same shelf as the bridge that is holding you up. A week later, a USPS postcard arrived like a soft stinger. Attempted pickup denied. ID mismatch at flagged P.O. box. I photographed the card, wrote the date in the closed log's margin, and did not reopen the case. Procedure had carried its own momentum. The net held without my hands. Evenings in this house have their own temperature. The kettle lifts a small ghost, the river makes its factual sound, and the sun holds the backsplash in a warm square before it moves on. I stood at the counter and admitted out loud what I had learned, not as a speech, but as a sentence I can remember when the world tries to trade clarity for speed. The camera didn't catch my family. It caught me choosing structure over panic. Paper was the tool. Dignity was the point. A home isn't proof you won. It's a set of instructions about how to treat the people inside it. So here's the piece I keep. Love without boundaries is sentiment. Love with boundaries is care. I kept the house not because walls matter more than people, but because the house taught me how to keep people safe, including me. That lesson won't trend. It will last. I still visit the river when I need to check my math. Tonight it ran low and honest, tugging at light as if polishing it. I walked the porch and thought about the day I pressed play and felt the blood go cold. Fear did part of the work, method did the rest. I have stopped recording for a moment now, not because the world is fixed, but because it is stabilized under the load I can name. I wrote one final line in the log with a pen that never had to testify. All loads declared, structure sound. I slipped the single key into my pocket, turned off the lamp, and let the camera's green LED be only a dot, not a verdict. In the dark, I could still see the square of light the sun leaves behind on the backsplash, as if the day wanted to sign something too. I breathed, the house held. So did I. When trust fractures, the easy impulse is rage. But safety built with steady hands, policies, signatures, witnesses, can turn panic into a path. Paper is not a weapon. It's memory that doesn't wobble. Boundaries don't shrink love. They teach it how to stand without leaning. In the quiet after the storm, what remains isn't victory over anyone. It's alignment with what is true. Dignity worth defending, a home that holds, and a life calibrated to carry only honest weight.